This is Dr. Karen, and you are listening to the De Facto Leaders Podcast on the B Podcast Network, where I share up-to-date, evidence-based practices, my own experiences, and guest interviews designed to help pediatric therapists, educators, and aspiring school leaders design services that support social, emotional, and academic growth and set kids up for success in adulthood. Whether you want to learn effective strategies for your therapy session or classroom, be an influential leader on your team, or find creative ways to use your skills to advance in your career, I've got you covered. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Karen, and welcome to episode 229 of the De Facto Leaders Podcast on the B Podcast Network. This is part 4 of a 5-part series on the 5 executive functioning skills that can inform your executive functioning framework. It is also the 4th episode where I will be slightly changing the pace on the De Facto Leaders Podcast to doing some shorter solo episodes to really pull out some of the great concepts that I have covered in either my solo content or in my guest interviews. Just because I've accrued so much content over the last 10 years, I want to be able to pull out the best of the best for you in a consumable way. So we're trying something different this year, and I also wanted to let you know that I will still be doing some of those guest interviews. So if you're interested in being a guest, if you have a suggestion for a guest, if you have a request for a topic, or if you would like to collaborate with me, have me on your podcast, or do some kind of a podcast swap, definitely reach out to me at talktome@drkarenspeech.com. So let's get into the topic of the day. So the last few episodes, we've been talking about these 5 executive functioning skills. Again, I like to organize executive functioning into skills that can be easily embedded into activities that educators are already doing, because they do not need another standalone program or curriculum. There are a lot of curriculums and initiatives that are very important to education, but with executive functioning, it really needs to layer on top of all of those other initiatives that are happening. So it is something that's really important that's going to help you amplify those other efforts that you have in place on your team. So I think that executive functioning, it really should be a universal design initiative. It should be something that is on the radar of all school leaders. I have found that whenever I talk about executive functioning, the comments I get are, why is it taking so long for schools to catch on to this? And I would say the positive thing is that I think that they are, because it is, I get such an overwhelming response whenever I talk about this topic. So I do think that people are catching on. It's just that we need to get all of the pieces in place. We need to make sure that we have a complete framework. And that's why I like to use this 5-component framework. When we think about the traditional definition of executive functioning, it's so abstract that sometimes people don't know how to translate that into practice. So that's why I wanted to talk about these 5 skills. So we've talked about time perception, self-talk, future pacing, or future thinking, and today we're talking about episodic memory. So I have touched a little bit on episodic memory in the past episodes, and really you'll find that these 5 skills, you're always really working on all 5 of them, even if you are really just focusing your attention on one, because they all are interwoven. They all impact each other. So for example, if you're working on self-talk, you need to be using your self-talk to direct you to another strategy. For example, to remind yourself to look at the time, which means that you're also working on time perception. If you're working on self-talk, you're also talking yourself through what the steps in your task are, which means that you're also working on future pacing. Well, what about episodic memory? Well, we can also use things like time perception and self-talk and future thinking to work on episodic memory. There's lots of overlaps there. What episodic memory is your ability to see a mental image of a past experience. And what that allows you to do is apply that information to a situation that you're currently in or a situation that you're planning for. So obviously, when we are thinking into the future, we have to use our episodic memory to help us plan, to think about a past experience that we had that's going to inform how we plan for the future. If you're thinking about how long something will take using those time perception skills, you've got to think about your past experiences. Time perception and episodic memory are heavily interrelated because if somebody says to you, this activity is going to take 15 minutes, well, you can think back into the past about that activity, or you can think about another activity that took you 15 minutes. You're using your episodic memory in order to do that. And then when you plan and estimate how long something will take, you've got to use that mental imagery of your past experiences, be talking to yourself about what that means, use that self-talk in order to come up with a plan for the future, which again, now we're back into future pacing, future thinking. So you can see how these things are all interwoven. Now, I wanted to just pinpoint. I've talked a lot about skills in the last few episodes, but I wanted to talk about some of the behaviors you might be seeing if students are struggling with episodic memory. So many times I will hear that people will say something like that their students avoid tasks or they seem resistant to things that are unfamiliar, and also that they don't seem to learn from past mistakes. These can be tied to issues with episodic memory because if you can't conceptualize a past experience that's going to help you visualize into the future about what this future experience is and help you understand it a little bit more, you're going to be a lot more anxious and resistant to trying that thing. So having that episodic memory can actually help to alleviate some nervousness about those new situations. If you can't think back on the past and think of a time when you were successful, or even just think of a time that could help you to have an idea of what lies ahead and how you might prepare yourself, then it's pretty natural to feel a little nervous about it. Now, is it normal for anybody, even if they have strong episodic memory, to be nervous about new situations? Absolutely. But is it going to be amplified if you are not using self-talk, if you haven't worked on your time perception to estimate how long things will take, if you're not sure how to plan into the future, and if you're having a difficult time envisioning in your head a past experience that might be like something that you're about to do? Is it normal to be way more nervous in that situation? Absolutely. It's going to be amplified if all of those skills are weak. So that's why it's very common to see that resistance, what sometimes gets described as defiance, if you have students who struggle with episodic memory. And also, even if kids might not mind trying something new, if they say, hey, you know what, I'll try it. Well, maybe they might not be as successful because if they can't think back on past experiences, they're going to act without reflecting about what did or didn't work in the past. So again, they will appear to not learn from past mistakes because they're not thinking about those past mistakes. They're not leveraging that episodic memory in order to do that. So how do we work on it? Well, this is obviously something that needs to be embedded and embedded into those daily activities. And we need to actually make a concerted effort to visualize what a past experience might look like. We might actually want to use visuals to remind someone of their past experiences while we're planning and preparing. And so a lot of times just working on things like self-talk and time perception and reflection can really be good opportunities when we'd be encouraging kids to actually work on those episodic memory skills. Now, if you want to learn more about how to create systems for working on these skills, how to bolster your own clinical skills, your own teaching skills, and create some systems that you can use to support your students, Or if you want to create some protocols that you can scale across your team so that your other team members are supporting executive functioning as well, I invite you to check out my free training for school leaders. And by school leaders, I mean school administrators, related service providers, and teachers. People who have the skill set, who are in a position to impact the way their teams support executive functioning. So, obviously, if you are an administrator, that would be you, as well as if you are in a role where you're working directly with students. You can absolutely, with the right systems, have an impact on the practices of your team. That training is called How to Create a Research-Based Executive Functioning Implementation Plan for Your School Team. It is on demand, and you can check it out at drkarendudek-brannan.com/EF leadership. In this training, I walk through common mistakes school teams make, the important shifts school teams need to make in order to ensure that students' executive functioning is supported across settings, as well as the systems that you need to put in place to ensure there is consistent implementation across your team. Again, check it out at drkarendudek-brannan.com/EF leadership. Thank you again for listening. If you found this episode useful, please leave me a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts. As always, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.